The sun shone brightly over the bustling streets of Bridgeport as Officer Greg Matt sipped his coffee in his patrol car. Greg was the kind of cop who often abused his authority, his arrogance and overconfidence leaving many in the community feeling disrespected. That day, like so many before it, he sat unaware that his life was about to take a dramatic turn. Across the street, a man in a sharp suit walked with quiet confidence. This was Marcus Harris. Though he had grown up in Bridgeport, Marcus had built a successful career elsewhere. What no one in the city knew, least of all Greg, was that Marcus had recently been promoted to captain and reassigned to the very precinct where Greg worked. This meeting, though unplanned, would set the stage for a life-changing confrontation. As Marcus crossed the street, Greg's gaze shifted from his coffee to the man walking toward him. There was nothing suspicious about Marcus, but Greg, with his skewed sense of authority, didn't like the calm, self-assured way Marcus carried himself. Without any real reason, Greg slammed his car door shut and stormed toward Marcus. "Hey you, what are you doing here?" Greg barked, his tone sharp and confrontational. Marcus turned to face him, calm and composed. "I'm on my way to a meeting," he replied politely, his tone measured and respectful. But Greg wasn't interested in the answer. He had already decided to assert his dominance over this stranger. Greg marched toward Marcus, his voice rising as he barked, "Show me some ID." Marcus remained calm, his movements deliberate as he reached into his jacket. However, Greg misinterpreted Marcus's calm demeanor and polite tone. To Greg, Marcus's self-assuredness felt like a challenge, and it only fueled his frustration. "Someone like you doesn't get to talk to me like that," Greg shouted, grabbing Marcus's arm roughly. Before Marcus could even respond, Greg's fist collided with his face. The punch was swift and forceful, sending Marcus stumbling backward. Despite the blow, Marcus managed to steady himself, standing upright. A faint red mark began to appear on his cheek, but his composure remained intact. Greg, on the other hand, smirked triumphantly. "Maybe now you'll learn some respect," he sneered, his voice dripping with arrogance. But Greg's smug expression quickly faded when Marcus finally spoke. His voice was steady, calm, but carried an undeniable authority. "You've just made a very big mistake, officer," Marcus said, locking eyes with Greg. Greg, still unaware of the gravity of his actions, scoffed. "Oh yeah? And what mistake would that be?" he asked, his tone laced with mockery. Marcus took a deep breath, his gaze unwavering as he delivered the words that would shake Greg to his core. "I'm Captain Marcus Harris, your new commanding officer." In an instant, the color drained from Greg's face. His smug confidence evaporated, replaced by a mixture of shock, fear, and regret. He stared at Marcus, his mind struggling to process what he had just heard. What did you say?" Greg stammered, his voice faltering. Marcus didn't flinch. He repeated himself, his tone firm and unyielding. "I said, I'm Captain Marcus Harris, the new captain of your precinct." Greg froze, his entire body stiff as the weight of his actions hit him like a freight train. The realization of what he had done, the man he had assaulted, sank in deeply. This wasn't just an act of disrespect. It was an act of violence against his superior officer. All the bravado Greg had displayed moments earlier was gone, replaced by a dawning understanding of the consequences he was about to face. Marcus stood tall, his commanding presence filling the space between them. Greg, meanwhile, could only stand there, paralyzed by the enormity of his mistake, as Marcus prepared to hold him accountable. In an instant, the color drained from Greg's face. His smug confidence evaporated, replaced by a mixture of shock, fear, and regret. He stared at Marcus, his mind struggling to process what he had just heard. What did you say?" Greg stammered, his voice faltering. Marcus didn't flinch. He repeated himself, his tone firm and unyielding. "I said, I'm Captain Marcus Harris, the new captain of your precinct." Greg froze, his entire body stiff as the weight of his actions hit him like a freight train. The realization of what he had done, the man he had assaulted, sank in deeply. This wasn't just an act of disrespect. It was an act of violence against his superior officer. All the bravado Greg had displayed moments earlier was gone, replaced by a dawning understanding of the consequences he was about to face. Marcus stood tall, his commanding presence filling the space between them. Greg, meanwhile, could only stand there, paralyzed by the enormity of his mistake, as Marcus prepared to hold him accountable. Marcus calmly reached into his jacket pocket and retrieved his official ID, holding it up for Greg to see. "This should answer any questions you might have," he said, his voice measured but firm. Let me be absolutely clear. You assaulted me, and I won't let this slide. I'll be filing formal charges against you." Greg stood frozen, his mind racing. The authority he had leaned on for so long now loomed over him as his worst nightmare. A few bystanders, having witnessed the entire incident, were now recording the scene on their phones. Greg's hands grew clammy, and his eyes darted nervously to Marcus's phone as he began dialing. "Captain Harris here," Marcus spoke into the phone with a calm yet commanding tone. "I'm reporting an assault by Officer Greg Matt. Please send a team to the corner of Maple Street immediately." His words were sharp and concise, leaving no room for ambiguity. Greg's stomach churned. The man he had punched was not just any civilian, but the captain of his precinct, someone with the authority to bring his career crashing down. Marcus stood tall, unwavering in his demeanor, while Greg felt the last remnants of his arrogance crumble under the weight of the situation. As the sound of approaching sirens grew louder, Greg knew there was no escape. The same badge he had once used to intimidate others had now become the chain around his neck, pulling him toward the inevitable consequences of his actions. A convoy of police cars arrived, their lights flashing as a team of officers stepped out. Leading them was Sergeant Parker, a seasoned officer known for her no-nonsense approach. She walked up to Marcus, her expression one of both respect and curiosity. "Captain Harris?" She greeted him with a nod. Marcus met her gaze with calm authority. "Sergeant, Officer Greg Matt assaulted me without provocation. I'm filing a formal complaint," he stated. His voice was steady, yet it carried the weight of justice. Parker's expression tightened as she turned to Greg, who was visibly shaken. "Is this true?" she asked, her tone sharp. Greg avoided her gaze, his voice trembling. I didn't know he was the captain," he muttered weakly. Parker cut him off, her voice firm and unyielding. "It doesn't matter who he is. You assaulted someone, your superior no less. That's inexcusable." She turned to the other officers and issued a curt command. "Cuff him!" Greg's colleagues, officers he had once worked alongside, approached him with solemn faces. They didn't hesitate as they placed the cold metal handcuffs around his wrists. Greg didn't resist. He knew it was over. The weight of his actions bore down on him as he was led toward the waiting squad car. Parker turned back to Marcus. "We'll handle this by the book, Captain. Is there anything else you need?" she asked. Marcus shook his head. "No, just ensure that the proper procedures are followed. I'll formalize the charges at the station," he replied. As the squad car pulled away with Greg inside, he felt the sting of the handcuffs digging into his wrists. Just moments ago, he had felt powerful, untouchable. Now, he was nothing more than a disgraced officer, his career and reputation in ruins. Once Greg was taken away, Marcus turned to the small crowd that had gathered. Their eyes were filled with a mix of shock and respect. Marcus paused for a moment, then addressed them with quiet conviction. "This incident serves as a reminder that power comes with responsibility. No one is above accountability, not even those who wear the badge." He then headed to the precinct to finalize his complaint. News of the incident quickly spread, amplified by the videos captured by witnesses. The footage showed Marcus's calm and composed response to Greg's unprovoked aggression, earning widespread admiration online. People praised his restraint and unwavering commitment to justice, calling him a symbol of integrity. For Marcus, the ordeal wasn't about revenge, but about setting a precedent. His actions demonstrated that authority should never be abused, and justice must always prevail. Over time, his name became synonymous with fairness and strength, inspiring countless individuals. This story didn't just highlight the consequences of Greg's actions, but also underscored the quiet power of Marcus's resolve. It was a tale of justice triumphing over arrogance, proving that in the end, doing what's right will always leave a lasting impact.